This is, well, it's 4 o'clock, so this is the Committee of the Whole for the Murray City Municipal Council for June 1st, 2021. And I'd like to welcome all members of the council with the exception of Rosalba Dominguez, who is excused. And let's see, who else? We've got the Mayor, GL, and anyway, welcome all. So we have no minutes for approval, and we'll start with discussion item number 1, which is presentation from the Boys and Girls Club. And I have listed Amanda Hughes, Leanne Saldivar, and Bob Dunn. Are you guys there?
I don't see him online, Diane. So I don't know if we want to go to Bruce's item and then see if they come.
Okay, all right. So far, we don't see them here, so we will go to discussion item number 2, which is discussion on Okay, discussion on vacating municipal utility easement to Security National, and I have Bruce Turner listed. Bruce, are you there?
I am.
Very good. Welcome.
Thank you.
Oh, there you are. All right. Good to see you.
It's nice to be seen.
Okay, what do you have for us?
Okay, hey Jen, do you have that map?
I do. I'll share it right now.
Yeah, thank you. Over at the Security National building, we had to reroute some power lines for them to build their new building. And there's an easement that they would like us to vacate. It's the yellow part of that map. Can you guys see that? It's just that little area right there. The
Where it has
square.
the, oh, I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, got it.
Yep. So we've rerouted all the power lines around their buildings, and that's the only easement that remains from the old easement. And they'd just like us to vacate it. We have no use for it. Like I say, everything's moved. We don't need it anymore. So I guess it's up to you guys if we want to vacate it or not.
Okay, any questions for Bruce? Why wouldn't, I mean, would there be any reason that we should not vacate it?
No, but I don't see any reason whatsoever.
Okay, so it's just kind of a formality.
Yep, that's all it is
Madam Chair,
formality.
may I add to this?
DL?
Yeah, so in years past, we've considered this administrative decision, and a vacation of an easement like this is power line easement would have gone just to the mayor. The legislature passed a bill some time ago, several years ago, that defines municipal utility easements. And those easements are required now to come to the city council to be vacated.
Oh,
But otherwise, you would never, before this, you would never have seen this.
yeah,
So that's what's new about it.
that's what I was trying to figure out, but now I see.
And the answer really is, yeah, this is just something we have to go through.
Okay, any other questions? All right. If you don't have anything else to add, Bruce, I guess we're good. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, see ya. Hopefully next time in person.
Yeah, next time I'll be there in person.
All right, that'd be good. Okay, take care. All right,
You too.
now,
Thanks.
now we'll go to number 3, which is discussion on an amendment to the general plan's future land use designation from low-density residential to medium-density residential, and to amend the zoning map from R18 to R16 and RM15 for 935 West Bullion. Melinda, and Jared. Oh, there you two are.
Just a minute. All right, are you seeing the presentation? Yes. Okay, got it now.
There it is.
All right.
All right. So this is, in spite of what you can't see at the top, this is actually, like Councilwoman Turner just said, this is a general plan amendment and zone map amendment at 935 West Bullion Street. Can you hear me okay, or do I need to? I'm pretty loud, but not quite that loud. So there are actually two properties here, and we'll get started by talking about those. This is 935 West Bullion Street. You can see the two different properties that are both in play here. The old communications facility site here, and then the empty land to the west of that. This property is currently zoned agriculture in the A1 zone. And the request is to rezone it into two different zones, the R16 and the RM15, two different portions of the property. We'll talk about that in just a moment, but just to set the background so that you can ask the right questions and we can get into it a little bit. It is in the A1 zone currently, and right now it's in two different future land use designations in the general plan. It's in the Parks and Open Space designation and in the Low Density Residential designation. You can see that split kind of here. It's in the Parks and Open Space because we made an assumption when we were doing the general plan in 2017 that this was part of the power corridor. The property's not. Had we realized that it wasn't part of the power corridor, preservation corridor, we would have put it in the low density residential category. So we focused in our reporting and in our presentations about this on the low density residential versus medium density residential, which is part of the request. The future land use map designation request is to go from that low density category to medium density residential. I'm sorry, yeah, that's all one screen, right? So this is a project that went through the Planning Commission twice, just to give a little bit of background so you understand what happened. The first request went to the Planning Commission for zone change and for general land use, future land use map designation change, and the applicant withdrew, and we can talk about that a little bit more as we go through it, but the applicant wound up withdrawing the applications and reapplying in order to limit his density. Part of the concern was that once that designation was changed and if the zone map amendment were granted to RM15, then he would be able to do much more than he was proposing. So he came back with a different application that you're going to see tonight to limit that density by way of two different zones, R16 and RM15, instead of all of the property going to RM15. That was partly an outgrowth of the comments that we received. We did receive a whole lot of comments from the public, from the neighborhood down in that area during that presentation, during that review. And that's in part because he had a neighborhood meeting. The applicant, Hamlet Development, held a neighborhood meeting where he showed everyone kind of what he wanted to do and why he wanted the zoning that he wanted. And as a result of that, a lot of comments were, well, we'd be okay with something less than the potential, but the potential is just too scary. Too many possible units, and this was the plan that he made a modification to his original plan based on those comments, and then came back and said, well, this is what I would do. And the Planning Commission and the public comments that came out that night and the ones that he had received leading up to the applications led him to believe that if he came back with a different amendment, a different request to rezone the front part of the property to R16 to allow something like this, and the back part of the property to RM15 to allow townhomes like this, that would be more palatable, that would be more acceptable, and that would limit him. He was willing to do this, and our zoning at RM15 would let him do much more. So with that said, we can come back to that as we need to, but the current application is for the zone map amendment to R16 for the front, 3.36 acres of the property, and RM15 for the back, 4.64 acres of the property. There are two properties there, so we'd as a result of zone change, if it were granted, we would actually make this lot line adjustment that you see here and then rezone accordingly. So the descriptions are all in place for these two pieces of property to exist like this instead of east and west as they exist currently. So it is possible to do this way in the two zones, and that would limit his overall density in the project, or in any project really, to about 9 units per acre as opposed to the overall 12 that an RM15 on all of the property would allow. His purpose is kind of twofold in doing this. These lots at the front are single family, and so it kind of keeps the rhythm of single family on the street that's more visible on Bullion Street, and then it lowers that density where it's most impactful here visually, and then allows him to kind of still cluster these townhomes in the back, keeping them off of this area here, which is a cell tower that you can't build any residential units within 165 feet of, and where he needs some land to create a repository for contaminated fill that's on the site. So I want to quickly go back before we go through the process and look at this aerial photo so we can talk about a couple of the reasons that we as staff and the Planning Commission ultimately recommended for these changes. And it has to do with development constraints and sort of the natural siting of the property. So you do have this cell tower that's right up here in this corner that you can't build within a certain number of feet of that cell tower. 165 feet, no residences, so you have a radius here where you can't build. And that actually creates a kind of an area where he can do a neighborhood park for the property and do a repository for contaminated fill. All of this land is part of, and I think this is in your staff reports, all of this land was part of the Highland Boy smelter site. So there are some contaminants there that need to be dealt with. Currently they're in this hillside and just buried. He would like to do the repository. He's got a Department of Environmental Quality sign off to go into the voluntary cleanup system. I'm forgetting the VCP, the program, voluntary cleanup program. He's working with DEQ to get that approved, and I believe they've approved him to work in that program, if not the specific plan yet. But he can do a repository here, clean up the site, and make that work. There's a lot of demolition to be done here as well, and these are all things that constrain the use of this site, make it difficult to be developed under the R18 that the general plan already supports. And that's the reason for the request to the general plan amendment and the request of the zone change to allow some more density. There is kind of a natural buffering on the site here. This is as I mentioned before, this is the power corridor. So this is open land that's going to remain. And this is an extension of that power corridor to the south of the property, 80-something feet to the south. So and then the Murray City Power property. And
Jared, real quick, so you just showed that space there. That's between the R16
yeah.
and the RM50. Is it?
This right here would be between the existing development RM.
Gotcha.
R18.
Thank
These are
you.
existing homes.
Gotcha.
And then this space right here is an easement, a power corridor easement that runs, and it's owned by UPNL. So that's not going away. So this space right here would be a natural buffer between the new project, which would be townhomes in this area inside the red. It doesn't actually border directly on the residential property. There's an easement between them.
Okay. 80, you said?
Kind of, yeah,
Okay.
sort of a natural buffer. So when we look at all these things together as staff, when Mr. Brodsky approached us about it and said, look, we have kind of natural buffers for the site. We have an environmental hazard on the site that needs to be cleaned up. That costs money. There's a lot of demolition on the site that you don't always see in residential greenfield development. There's usually some demolition, not usually on the order of a building like this, and all this satellite antenna. So with those constraints and the natural buffering, we felt like as a staff there was a zone change worth supporting that would allow some additional density in here that could be naturally buffered.
Jared,
Existing uses, yeah.
are the developers expecting us to provide any funding for the mitigation of that? No?
Not at this time, no. There's no RDA in this area to provide that kind of funding. There are some avenues he could pursue, not with us directly.
Yeah, there's a couple of options that he could pursue, not through Murray City.
Okay.
There's a brownfield cleanup grant that runs up and down the Wasatch Front that he could look
Right.
at. It's a low interest grant, but there's no funding that we would have for him. He hasn't asked us for any.
So it's his responsibility then to
Yeah.
to
and
foot the full bill.
I believe his estimate, when when we hold the public hearing on the 15th, we will go over this information, but I believe the estimate to clean it up is, I think, 1.2 million. And he does already have his voluntary cleanup program approved through the state. So if this does get approved, he would be ready to start that program. And it's through the State Department of Environmental Quality. So this would be his 4th time through a cleanup in Murray.
So he's familiar with the process and,
Yeah.
okay. And where is it? Is the hazardous materials all through that property or where?
My understanding is that it was moved, when this was built, when this project was developed as the communications facility, it was embedded in this hillside. It's kind of a hole there. And the material was
Oh,
embedded in
okay.
the hillside. That's been my understanding, although I wouldn't guarantee that.
Okay. So it needs to be cleaned up, that's for sure.
It would be better through a DEQ approved program, yes. Definitely.
Yeah, I mean, we wouldn't, because we know there's contamination that exists there, we would not issue any type of a land excavation permit without a surety that the contaminated materials would be handled appropriately. So any future development of this site would have to have some type of DEQ approval of a process to clean it up.
Is that probably why it's been empty, vacant for so long, do you think?
Yeah,
I mean-
we know there's been a number of developers that have looked at the site, and my understanding is that most have walked away when they've found out about the contamination, and knowing the cleanup costs that are involved with that, or just not even the costs, but the expertise and the risk involved with making sure you have all of the proper training in place for cleanup. So it's a large endeavor that not every developer is willing to undertake.
Okay. Then to just have it all be open space would cost the city a lot of money then.
Well, we don't own it, so that there's really no.
I know, but for us to buy it and
One of the,
make a park out of it and,
I think one of the entities that passed on buying it was our power department, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, our power department looked at purchasing it and for various reasons didn't end up moving forward with that. That was last year. And yeah, if regardless of who owns this, whether it to be the city, private party, a developer, in order to do anything different with a property, they would have to clean that up
right.
somehow.
If I might, during his first presentation had a park there. And the citizens, there were several citizens and they were very vocal. They didn't want any more parks. Murray has enough parks. We don't want a park there. So
Really?
he changed to this next one, yeah. So a park was part of his, I think it was like 2.5 acres of it was going to be a park, and people didn't want it.
Wow.
So-
Density was more clustered.
Yeah.
It was all townhomes, and so all the units were to the west and south, and the park was out along the road. That was roundly rejected.
Yeah, and it's a little confusing too to be before the council on a general plan amendment and a zone map discussing a project.
Right.
Because normally we don't. We talk about uses of the property. Because there was the public meeting or the neighborhood meeting that was held, that really kind of integrated the conversation. That it was too confusing with all of the public comments that were coming in and the questions to not address the project as well. And so this is something normally we're not having a dialogue about number of units in particular to a project, but once that neighborhood meeting was held, it really became necessary, I think, to have the discussion about more of the specifics that Mr. Brodsky and Hamlet Development was looking at. Otherwise, it just was too confusing to try and help the public understand some of the questions and the realities of what was possible there and what he was proposing. So the initial proposal came in for 92 townhomes, and a portion of that would have been 2.5 acres of a park that he was proposing be open to the public, and that would be where the repository for the contaminated soil would be located. And the neighborhood, as Councilmember Cox indicated, the neighborhood did not want another park over there. They felt like they had adequate parks. So then Mr. Brodsky came back and, put forth another concept that is really what generated the application that's here today.
Right.
Interesting. Yeah, that was going to be my next question. Why are we discussing that part of
Yeah,
it?
it
Because
just-
we
it just-
don't usually.
Yeah, and we really honestly kind of, for this reason, discourage neighborhood meetings because it just gets too entangled with a specific project, and then there's expectations that come from the people who were part of the process and making public comments of what should be built and constructed, and so we really do try and stay away from that, but it became too difficult to kind of separate the two.
And so without talking about the project any more than we sort of had to, like Melinda said, when you look at the zoning that's proposed, it mirrors this kind of project. So although it doesn't, if the zoning were changed and approved to be R16 and RM15,
Yeah, can you go
Oh,
back
am I
to
not
the-
on it?
There we go. Okay.
Okay.
so if the zoning were approved and changed to R16 and RM15 as he's requested, this is representative of the maximum density you could do, about 9 units to the acre between the two different acreages. So you can do the 12 back here, and you can do the 12 on this portion. You can do about 7 units to the acre out here, a little less with the public road out. But you wind up with that same kind of density. You may not get this exact configuration if Mr. Brodsky, you still have that same element of uncertainty, because if he sells the project or something goes wrong or whatever, but you're not rezoned to RM12 all over with just the promise that we're gonna do slightly less than we're allowed to do. You're limited to this density per acre overall, about 9 units. And again, with that natural buffering that's in place, and with a little bit of proximity to 700 West as a minor arterial, et cetera, staff felt like this was a good opportunity for us to add some density in an area and get a project done that otherwise folks have walked away from because of the constraints on the site. So it does require that land use amendment, that land use map amendment from the general plan, which we don't always like to see, but we feel like under some of the goals of the general plan, that's supportable.
Will you go back to that last one for a second? Thank you. We're being asked to rezone RM15, but with 9 units possibly to the acre, a maximum of 12. Will you explain that? Because a lot of people still think 15, and it's confusing because if I understand it properly, you have RM15, but then in that property, you have to take out land for roads, for sidewalks, for curb and gutter and things. So
Yeah.
people see RM15 and they think 15 units per acre, when in fact that isn't the case or couldn't be the case.
Not normally the case.
Yeah.
So the two parts of that question, and it's a good question, good clarification. The overall density of a project like this, taking all of the acreage considered together with the two different zones combined, is about 9 units to the acre, all of it together. This up here at R16 is a density of about 7 units to the acre, or 6,000 square foot lots. All of these represent, in this whole property, there's 6,000 square feet per lot. So it's a little different than the unit per acre density that we normally calculate. And back here, where it's RM15 in his proposal, you get 12 units to the acre. We have these confusing multifamily zones. RM12 or RM15, the base density is 12 units per acre. If you want to get to 15 units per acre as a density, you have to do a whole bunch of things for the density incentive bonus. And they're just, in short, not doable in a normal project, and certainly not in a project with the constraints this one has. Not all the space can be used because you have a repository that has to be built, and you have this 165-foot buffer from this tower, which means you're not going to get to use all the property. So even if you did the density bonus items and created affordable housing options that were guaranteed 50 years into the future and extra landscaping, all of them kind of move your functional density down too, because there are logistical problems with providing those density bonuses or getting that density bonus. So you're really at 12 units per acre when you're talking about RM15 zoning. I've not had a single project that's been processed since I've been here for 7 years that made it through the density bonus project. I'm only aware of one, and it wasn't the full density bonus all the way to the extra density. It was one level, and it was a little dubious, to be honest. I'm not sure it really met that intent, but I didn't process it, so I won't say any more about that. So, yeah, you can't really get to RM15. It's RM12. I don't have any concern about it being 15 units per acre. And even if it were, it's a portion of the property now. It's 4 acres of it, minus this 3.36 that's in the R16. And that's really what Mr. Brodsky was trying to do, was respond to the concerns that we were hearing in the comments that we received and that we read out loud in the hearing, and say, I'm not trying to do, I don't need to do 90 units. I need to do, I think we ended up at 70-something with it in this acreage.
Had the entire property been zoned to RM15, in theory, he could have done up to
100-something.
20, I think, units. No more than that. And that would have been with the density bonuses. He only wanted to do the 95, but the neighborhood, again, their comments and concerns in the neighborhood meeting where that was too dense. And so he's trying to respond to those concerns, and that's when the concept for this kind of split in the zoning came to him, which in trying to be responsive to that, well, yeah, you still could do this many, or a developer says he's only going to do this many, but we all know if it gets rezoned, somebody else buys it, they wouldn't stick to that. And so that's where he's come forward with this, that by splitting it this way, the density allowance between the two zones really is about 75 units total. So about 55 of the townhomes and then 20 single-family lots.
So just one more question. I'm wondering, so staff has determined that infrastructure is fine? There's no concerns in that regard?
That's a good question. No, there aren't. We've been through, there's been a traffic impact study done, found that there's no significant impact to level of service, no real requirements as a result of this kind of density being added to the project. Bullion functions at a level of service A and will continue to function at a level of service A. So there is some impact to different intersections, but nothing that warrants a change to those services, to those facilities. So traffic impact study was negative, no problems from that. There was also, we had a sit-down meeting with a gentleman from the school district. There were a lot of comments about impacts to the schools. We had a good meeting with him. He's the service coordinator for Murray School District. He wasn't concerned about this. He had received the notice. He wasn't worried about it. We did talk to him about some other projects going on too. We're planning to meet every month or so with him. He seemed really interested in all the things going on, and that we think it would be beneficial to meet more often with them in between the larger meetings that get conducted. But there were no concerns from the school district about the specific site and its development, no.
If I might, I actually talked to the school district about that because it came out in one of our meetings that Viewmont was full. And I talked to the superintendent, and she told me if this were to go forward, what they would do is stop taking, and I'll call them permit students, but I don't know what the real thing is, but they're out-of-district students. And by the time this project, if it's approved, by the time this project comes to fruition and people are actually living there, those people would have cycled through and been in junior high, and there'd be room for any children that came.
Sure, that makes sense.
Yeah.
The gentleman we met with talked about that kind of thing too. He said it's really a matter of moving programs and things around if we really needed to, but he didn't see a lot of need for that in this area arising from this kind of project and the numbers of students they would expect from it based on their experience. So yeah, we don't, we tried to look into that carefully. We always ask for input from affected entities. So we send out notices of these kind of things to the school district, to all of the public utility providers, and we generally don't see responses from them unless it's really big projects. And one like this, although it seems big in the area that it's in, it's not large enough to generate a lot of concern with the school district. It didn't generate any concerns from our public utility departments, from water, sewer, power. There are things that need to be done, but nothing out of the ordinary for development. And traffic was the other big concern. We don't have any indication from the traffic impact study that was done, or frankly from the master transportation plan that's on its way your direction, that this should be a concern.
Regarding the traffic study, there's been some criticism of doing any traffic study during a pandemic, is obviously, and you can't wait, 2-3 years to do the traffic study, obviously. But could you talk a little bit about what that looks like, how long they're there? And then you mentioned it's an A and it will continue to be an A. Could you talk a little bit more about what that means?
Yeah, so that's a great question and a good point. There's been a lot of concern, not just with this project, but with other projects. Traffic studies during COVID-19, you're doing traffic counts when it's the least amount of people driving in the last 20 years or whatever. We didn't, they did do numbers. They did traffic counts and saw differences. So they averaged those and take numbers from the 2019, we'd have projects from the area in 2019, not specifically on Bullion, but for a couple of years past, we had traffic counts on Bullion from projects that were done, Murray Cove and Walden, I forget the name of the project on Walden Glen. There were other traffic studies that had numbers from 2019, pre-COVID numbers that they were able to use and work into the models as well. So it's not just looking at numbers from nowadays when there are fewer cars and the schools aren't as open or haven't been as open. They looked at other numbers too. Level of service is a measurement of how long you wait at an intersection, how well an intersection is functioning. So I'm going to forget, but let's just look at a couple of numbers here real quickly. 90 townhome units. This was all done. The level of service, the traffic impact study was not redone when you reduced the number of units. That seemed redundant, so it was done with 90 units on the original plan. Anticipated to project 640 weekday trips, 44 trips on the morning peak hour, 54 at the peak evening hour. Bullion Street is carrying, is it 1,200? I want to say, I'm not looking at the master transportation plan right now, about 1,200 cars a day. The facility is designed to handle upwards of 5,000 a day. So we're not going to generate anything that's going to cripple Bullion or slow down intersections to the point where they're not functioning. There's always going to be traffic during peaks, during evening and morning peaks, and with the schools in the area, you're going to see that. But nothing that would say that would let us deny a project based on that. Of course, this is a zone change, but regardless, we don't see an impact for the traffic that's significant.
So essentially, the traffic impact analysis is, all of those consultants have developed a way to compensate for the differences in traffic patterns because of the pandemic. And they did use some methodology in this study to either project those, or they looked at past studies and projected growth. And there has been some criticism from the public about the traffic impact study, but that's why those studies are reviewed by the city's engineer. So there's oversight to that, and as Jared mentioned, really the outcome of this traffic impact study, the science does not suggest at all that there would be any impact to the level of service. It's a level of service A. Before the project, it would be a level of service A after the project. And that level of service A, any of those actually, they're a convenience factor. So a level of service A is the most convenient. There's minimal wait times, if any, and as you get on to B, C, D, E, and F, is the wait times increase. So it's not any function of safety either. It's just really convenience factor rating. That doesn't change with the proposed density of the 90 or the 75.
Let's see.
I'll ask one more question if
Sure.
anyone else is leaning forward. So my other question is just about the RM15 specifically as a zone. What are the height restrictions on development that can happen in that area?
That's a good question. It's 40 feet in the RM15 zone.
All right, and that's how many floors?
Well, that's the same. It doesn't tell you can't have multiple floors. It
Right.
just says 40 feet. So you could do 3 stories easily in the RM15. I'm not on the right slide here, but
That's okay.
I do have one. Do have a slide about that. There you go. Oh, I'm on the wrong one. Sorry. Well, none of those are the right slide. I know I have one. Maybe I don't have one on this one. I know I have one on Jefferson. But yeah, 40 feet is the overall height that's allowed in the RM15. So we do allow up to 3 stories, yeah.
Thank you.
Well, you were going to say that you thought there was what? Jefferson House?
We have a table in Jefferson, on the Jefferson Street rezone that has them laid out together.
Okay, maybe we can see those next time. Okay.
So, I think this may have been a little bit of the direction that Councilmember Martinez was going in, but we did want to just discuss, so the applications that you have before you are to discuss, to decide about the general plan amendment and the zone map only. Even though we have been discussing a project, that's not anything that would be included in this approval. And so if this were to be approved next council meeting, June 15th at the public hearing, then Mr. Brodsky would need to come back to Planning Division, submit a project application that then would go through its regular process with the Planning Commission. And one of the things that gives us as staff a level of confidence that we can mitigate some of these concerns is because that does have to go through a very specific process for the Planning Commission where we can discuss impacts to neighboring existing residential. We've talked in other meetings about buffering, and those types of items can be addressed if the zone change is approved and when that project comes through. So that's the slide that's just kind of saying, we're discussing the general plan amendment, the zone map amendment only, project will come later, but that goes through its own public process as well.
Can I ask one more question?
No, that's great.
So previously, a company owned this property with the satellites, and it was functioning when the last general plan was made. Is that accurate? Okay. So without anticipating that, that would go away, there's some questions of what is a typical change in zoning, like going from agriculture to residential, from sort of like larger single homes to multifamily. Like, is there something that's typical when making a general plan change historically?
I don't know if I would say typical, but the indicator here is that we had said low density residential regardless, even though it was functioning as a satellite facility, as a communications facility. It was in this agriculture zone, and we tend to take agricultural zoning and in an area where most of it is low density residential already, we would apply that low density residential.
So it's not really a leap from agriculture to,
No.
because that was already in the plans that this would be low density. It's, and the front part, the R16, that's still, is that low density? That's still low density?
Residential. That's
Okay.
a category that corresponds to low density residential. Yeah.
Right, okay. I live in an R16, but I had 15 kids in my front yard this morning, so it didn't feel like,
It doesn't feel low density.
it didn't feel low density today, but yes, it is low density, and then the area behind it. So that's the only real, shift to the general plan looking forward is the RM15.
Yeah, the change to the medium density residential land use category to allow that RM15, that's the real shift. Going from agriculture is an anticipated change.
Right, that's already part of the plan.
Farming going on in Murray right now.
Not anymore.
Agriculture is a holding zone.
Okay, thank you.
Well, and two things to just kind of tack on to that based on some of the comments that we have seen from the public. One, I think it's important to distinguish that townhomes are not high density. It may feel that way, but we have very distinct categories of low density, medium density, and high density, and townhomes are not high density. They're medium density. So the other thing is there's been kind of a lot of fodder about jumping zoning designations, and that's just simply not how land use planning works. You don't have to go from R16 to R18 to RM10 to whatever, you just change a zone. So when folks are saying like, oh, that's a huge jump, you're jumping so many levels, that's not really anything that we look at, because it's just a change in use. And we look at the uses and not, it's not like a certification process where you would have to get a certain achievement in order to go on and pass a test and get another one. It just is a change.
That's fair.
And also, regardless of what the change that was proposed, if somebody comes in, submits an application and pays their application fee, we process the application regardless. We do go through the process of determining whether or not the general plan can support it, if it makes sense, if we feel like we can counterbalance some of the impacts that may be there with a specific zone use. But we process applications because they're submitted and the applicant takes or pays for the application to be processed. So there's also been, residents in the area that have questioned why we're even bringing this to the city council, and that's just simply because somebody came in and filed an application and paid their fees, and that's what we do. That's part of our job, is to process the applications that come to us.
And if I might, that leads me to one other point that I did want to make, and then we can take any other questions that you have. One other concern that was raised was that this would set a kind of a dangerous precedent for A1 zoning anywhere in the city. So anywhere there's A1 zoning now, people are going to be able to come in and say, well, you've already set this precedent that you'll rezone to RM15. And that's just, not to sound glib, but that's not how precedent works. This is an individual situation. There are buffers here that don't exist. We didn't contemplate anyone wanting to do more density on this project in order to overcome site constraints. So those coincidences aren't going to happen on every single piece of property in the city, and certainly not on every A1 piece of property in the city. So, and we wouldn't support a change like this in every situation as staff, but where we see an opportunity like this to add some of that density and solve a problem that the city has, not just add density so a developer can get more units, but solve an environmental problem that exists, get the property developed and cleaned up in these vacant buildings. Now it's vacant. When it was in operation, it wasn't even on our radar, no pun intended, since it's a radar facility. But it wasn't on our radar until that was vacant, and people started to come in and look at it and question what they could and couldn't do. And as developers failed in looking at it for their potential projects, and Mr. Brodsky came in and said, I would do some townhomes on that and use that density to clean the property up and cluster it and do a repository on it. That made some sense. We felt like we could get behind that as staff and take a chance on it. So it doesn't represent the normal kind of rezoning that we would want to support, but it does represent a good opportunity, we felt like.
Yeah, and it's also important for the council to know that, and this is more so for the Planning Commission, but a lot of what comes before the Planning Commission, there's really no discretion as to whether or not they approve it. It's just under what conditions it gets approved. In this case, the Planning Commission is a recommending body. The council is the land use authority on zone map amendments and the general plan amendments. But it's truly a discretionary decision, meaning there's nothing that forces your hand to approve this if it's not something that you feel like can be worked through and that you can support. When we're talking about conditional use permits, we're looking at whether or not a project meets code. And if it meets code, we have to approve it. This is a discretionary decision for the council to determine a change to the general plan amendment. And that's, I think, a part of the public process that realizes, again, that there should be some deference given to the general plan and the effort that's been put through that in the past, and that it may not be the right time or the right location if the council doesn't feel that way, but it may also be the right time and the right location if you feel like this is something that would benefit the particular set of circumstances as we've discussed today. So with that, I mean, we'd love to talk about any more questions you would have, but the Planning Commission did hear this on May 6th, and We mailed out 145 notices, so with a project or a project site this large, it's a 500-foot radius. We received 47 public comments that the planning commissioners all reviewed and considered. And it was a very difficult decision for them to make because they see values on both sides. But essentially, the planning commission forwarded a recommendation to you as the council in a split vote, 4-3, to support the general plan amendment and the zone map amendment. And then here's to go into a little bit more detail about the general plan and how we as staff felt that this could be a supported change. I'll let Jared go into the findings that we want to present to you.
Okay, Jared, we need to continue on, but let me see if there are any other questions from the council to make sure that, okay.
Thank you all. Good
So
questions.
I think we're good. Yes, thank you so much. All right. Okay, so now we are at the discussion on zone map amendment from R18, low-density single-family, to R16, medium-density single-family, for the properties at 6556, 6562, 6566 Jefferson Street. You two are up again.
Fantastic. Well, thank you. So this is a company called Landforge has made this application for zone change. This zone change application is for the properties you. Thanks, I appreciate it. The properties you just gave the addresses for, they're on Jefferson Street, on the west side of Jefferson Street here, stretching to the tracks line. You can see them highlighted there in blue. They are in the R18 zone currently, and the requested amendment is to R16. The general plan calls this area out as low-density residential, and as we discussed on the last item, R16 is one of the zones that corresponds to low-density residential, as well as R18. So there's no general plan map amendment as a part of this. It's just the zone map amendment. The property, as we said, is in that low-density residential category. R16 fits into that category as well. And again, this is just from the general plan about low-density residential, the kind of development it supports or should support, and the corresponding zones, and you can see R16 is one of those. The other important factor on this particular zone map amendment request is the Fashion Place West small area plan that was just adopted. So in that Fashion Place West plan, so you can see the station area here is item 3, sub-area. They created these sub-areas for that Fashion Place West plan because there was such a distinct, it's a different track station than our other track stations. And it has a different kind of a surrounding area, some industrial area here right around the station itself, and then these large areas of established single-family residential zoning and development. That's the subcategory 1, sub-area 1. And this property falls in sub-area 1. And without, they're this very established residential sub-area, without being too, not to put too fine a point on it, but basically the sub-area 1 tells you that while you should entertain some infill density at slightly higher densities, nothing too drastic is appropriate because these areas are largely built out and they're very well established as single-family neighborhoods. So anything that we do, if this were a request to do RM25 zoning or something, we would be saying no, those densities are inappropriate. But R16 from R18, you're talking about 4 additional units perhaps in a project. So we feel like that's appropriate. It's the kind of density change that we would want to see or that we'd support based on that Fashion Place West small area plan. And then the other thing that sub-area 1 is going to tell us and let us do as a planning commission, if it's approved for a zone change, is really look at the context around the plan that goes in place, the subdivision or the housing development that comes in on the basis of a different zone. How does it fit in with the context? Is it sensitive to that? Is it going to mesh with the fabric of that area based on that zone change? And we feel like with an R16, yeah, we can accomplish that. If we go too high, we wouldn't be able to do that. Landforge came in with that same kind of discussion and wanted to be very context sensitive and settled on the R16 as the density that they really needed to do the kind of project they would want to do. We're supportive of that as a staff for a bunch of reasons, but in this table, this is the one we were talking about before that we didn't have for your presentation on Bullion. We'll have it for the 15th. The R18, for example, the uses that are allowed residentially in the R16 and the R18 are virtually the same. Single family detached dwellings at certain densities and lot sizes. You can do PUDs that let you change those lot sizes or cluster homes, et cetera, even attach homes in a PUD. But the lot size is what really governs kind of the underlying density, 8,000 square feet per unit or lot in the R18, 6,000 in the R16. So not a huge distinction, not a huge difference. Heights are a little more lenient in the R18 than they are in the R16, 30 feet in the R16. Front yard setbacks in R16, you get a little bit of a break. But again, in a PUD, which is the likely outcome of any kind of zone change like this, you really can vary those things based on the site design anyway. One thing also to point out is that in the zones, there's no real parking breaks in these zones. We've talked a lot lately about parking and density when we were talking about mixed uses, and so I wanted to make sure I made this point. This is not a mixed use. This is an R16, so this is just residential development. You park your residences at dwellings get parked at two spaces per unit, period, in the residential zones. The Planning Commission held their hearing on the 15th of April. There were 80 notices sent out for 400 feet. We did receive 4 comments. One of those was positive, I believe, and a couple of kind of questioning the zone change and the density that would come with it. The Planning Commission ultimately forwarded a recommendation to you to approve on a 6-0 vote. They were supportive of the item. And staff, again, we would reiterate our support for this change. We did make some findings in the general plan. The general plan does provide for that flexibility. The zone change makes sense in that area. It's not overly dense for that area to fit in, especially when you're considering the Fashion Place West small area plan. We do feel like it fits in well with that. It's not overreaching. The proposed zone map amendment is supported by that general plan and the future land use map as well, and we are supportive of it. This, again, in terms of process, this is just for the zone change. It's not the application for the subdivision of the housing development. That would go to the Planning Commission if the zone change were approved by the council. Any questions for staff?
I've been over there several times and looked at this. Help me feel good about Jefferson Street, because there are no sidewalks.
Yeah.
There are no room for sidewalks, unless you take half the lawn that the people already have that are established there.
Yeah.
And I know it's only four more units, but it makes me nervous not to be able to have, but not just children, but people, someplace they can walk other than right on that narrow street when we continue to increase the density.
That's a great point. And it's concerning to me too. And it was a concern that the staff and our consultants and the Planning Commission and everybody had during the Fashion Place West area, small area plan. Sidewalks are needed in this area very badly. So although that will be a challenge to provide, that's one of the goals of that Fashion Place West small area plan too, is to find a way to implement sidewalks. If we have to do them curb adjacent in some way or on one side of the street only, or what that plan will be, we don't know. The first steps toward it would be taken with a subdivision that might come, whether this was rezoned or not. If it stays R18 and gets rezoned, if it stays R18 and gets subdivided under that auspice, we would still look at sidewalks. We're not going to promote a subdivision here that doesn't provide sidewalks. Now, that's only sidewalks in front of this little bit of frontage that they have, but we need to come up with an area plan for sidewalks. It's one of the first things that we need to cross off our list from that Fashion Place West area plan. We don't have it yet, but this would be the first step toward that, to providing sidewalks throughout that area that have been neglected for a lot of years. It won't be easy. But.
Yeah, I appreciate that, but there again, there's driving down that road, there's no room for sidewalks.
Right, not currently. I mean, there's right of way for it. We could get right of way for it, but we haven't come up with a plan for what Jefferson ought to be in terms of width overall. We'll have to work with Public Works to do that. In terms of the subdivision, you're right. It's maybe 4 additional units, but I would argue that, like, right now, not wanting to put extra people out on Jefferson because there aren't sidewalks currently, the R18 subdivision, we couldn't put that off whether they were asking, if they weren't asking for the zone change, we couldn't put off the subdivision because of it. And the 4 additional units, it's a question we need to answer, and it's bigger than the 4 units or not.
Thank you.
You bet.
Any other questions? Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
All right, now we are at the Power Department Quarterly Report, UAMPS and IPA Report. Blaine Hackey, welcome in person. This is so nice.
It's great to be here. I had the option to Zoom, but I opted to see your faces, so thank you for having us.
So glad you chose that option.
It's been a while, hasn't it?
Yes, long.
Diane, do I have my full 15 minutes, or are we tight?
No, we're good.
Okay.
You have the
Right.
full time.
All right, I'm going to combine my comments with the UAMPS board report, the IPA board, and then just a system update of how we're doing with the power department, looking into our summer load a little bit. You know, today's June 1st. We're expecting 100-degree temperatures by the end of the week, I think. We're close to it.
Crazy.
And so we're going to be scrambling a little bit for power right off the bat. But I'll go into that with a little more detail in just a second. So I thought I'd talk about the UAMPS board. As you know, UAMPS is an organization with about 40 other municipal cities. We're one of the 40. A lot of the comments or a lot of the, I guess, discussion in the UAMPS group is still about the small nuclear project that a lot of the UAMPS members are part of. And as you remember, we opted not to participate in that anymore last October. Concerning that small nuclear project, I know very little about what's happening there. Once the meeting gets going on the UAMPS monthly meeting, they excuse those members that aren't participants in that. And so I don't know a lot because of closed-door discussion what's happening there. The program is, the project is pursued. They're still pursuing the project as UAMPS group. I believe there's 25 or 26 cities still involved. They're still concerned about subscription, making that project worthwhile and big enough to make it happen. But I really don't know much about the project, just the fact that it's still moving. I do know a little bit about the Navajo project. As you remember, we voted to participate in the large-scale solar project down in the Navajo Reservation area. We are 5 megawatts of the 66-megawatt project. That is being built as we speak. It's not going to be operational until 2022, spring of 2022, so we still have another year. The 5 megawatts will help us with our renewable portfolio, the percentages of clean energy, you might say. And so I feel good about our participation there. A lot of the UAMPS members are still pursuing other large-scale solar projects. And so we do have the opportunity at some point in time, immediately or in the short or long-term duration, to buy into or participate in more solar. And there's even a few geothermal projects coming down the pike. It seems like there's a lot of developers that are approaching UAMPS on different power projects. And it's all clean energy projects. Very few other energy projects are being pursued for obvious reasons. Next up, the Light Up Navajo project that we participated in last spring, 2 springs ago, I guess it was. We sent a crew down to the Navajo Reservation to help them with the building of their distribution line. It wasn't held last year because of the COVID situation, but we have decided that we wanted to send a crew there next time they do it. And so they have had some interest submittals, I guess you could say, and we have opted to send a crew next May. We've already signed up for a spot. May 8th, I think, is the week of May 8th. We are going to send a crew down of 2022 next year. And so we will participate in that. We're excited to do that. Our crews came back all fired up. I know Mayor Kemp actually had an on-site visit with Bruce Turner, and our crews came back and said, let's do it again. And so we're going to do that again next May. That was already in the budget that the council has looked at as contributed services or something. I can't remember what the heading was, but that'll be I think was around a $30,000 item that we will eat. I don't know what the word would be, but so we're going to do that. Donate. Thank you. Donate. Next up is today. Just today, you might have received the itinerary for the summer conference from UAMPS. If you didn't receive it, Jennifer Kennedy now has it, and she will distribute that to you. The UAMPS organization has our summer conference this year in Squaw Valley. It's on August 15th through the 18th. You might ask why Squaw Valley, which is the Lake Tahoe area. It's because it is Squaw Valley is located in the Truckee-Donner Public Utility District. Truckee-Donner is a member of UAMPS. In fact, we have a deal, Marie has a deal with Truckee-Donner about some of our landfill methane produced energy that we provide for Truckee-Donner. So that's why we're going to that area. Usually they like to hold the UAMPS meetings in areas that are UAMPS members' areas. Logan, Midway, Truckee-Donner area, and then Jackson Hole, all are in UAMPS members. So Jennifer will get you that information. Don't need to act on it right away, but be aware that that's coming down the pike. One more item on another coal-fired plant that UAMPS is participants in. We have a slight ownership in the San Juan coal plant. It's down in the Four Corners area. This coal plant is going to be demolished or walked away from in 2022 as well, next spring. It's because of the California interest in that project. There's many California members that own and are participants in the San Juan coal plant, and they can't take coal-fired energy into California because of Sacramento legislative mandates. And the result of that is that no one wants that coal plant anymore. Although it has served us well, it's a small portion of Murray's needs, about 2%. I just wanted you to know that that is ongoing, that next year at this point in time, that coal plant will be let go. Now, there's a slight little caveat maybe to that, is that Farmington, New Mexico, which is the economic driver city in that area, as well as the New Mexico Public Utility District, I think there's a district in New Mexico, are still trying to get that plant operable, or at least in part. They still need the energy. They're going to have to go somewhere to get that energy, and there's workings and proposals that they will be able to sequester or capture some of the contaminants coming out of the pipe or the exhaust stacks, not pipes. And so there's a slight chance that that plant will continue to go past 2022. But Murray and UAMPS are looking at that. If it's economically feasible for us and they can run that clean, then we might still be participants in that project. But for the most part, that's going to be gone. Most of the UAMPS members, the 40 some odd members, are at a stagnant or a no growth pattern, except, and Murray is one of those. We're not seeing any growth as far as energy load sales. We're kind of okay with that. We're still making ends meet. We're still making progress. Our growth is about 1% or less every year. And we're in the same boat with Logan and Bountiful and some of the other bigger cities. But Heber City, Lehigh, and St. George are seeing double-digit growth. So UAMPS as a group is seeing 1 to 2% growth, but those three cities I mentioned are seeing huge growth. Just wanted you to know that we are probably more of the norm in this area, is that we're not seeing a lot of growth. And I think that a lot of that's because of the conservation people are doing. We see that from a lot of the other cities, is that the status quo is the way it's going. And but those three cities, Lehigh in particular, and Heber, I can't imagine Murray going 15% growth every year. It means we have to build a substation every 4 or 5 years, and that's an amazing amount of work. On the national level, this is my last comment about UAMPS, and I'll move on to IPP. On the national level, we're seeing a lot of congressional proposals coming down through the Biden administration, and I want you to be aware of a few that are going to be very interesting to watch. One is called the Clean Future Act. That's been a proposal by, I think it's Senator Pallone, from a Democrat from New Jersey. He is trying to get some national mandates that we have an emission target of 0 emissions by 2035. Means anything that we have that's dirty right now, we'll have to either get rid of or make some type of modifications. And that'll, according to his proposal, that would address every sector of the economy. It would require us to have yearly clean energy procurements, and so we'd have 0 emissions by 2035. That's not very far away. When you consider we have about 40% of our resource mix is now coal, and that would have to be dealt with. There are other legislative issues coming down. A Smith from Minnesota is pushing for a zero emission by 2050. Same type of proposal, but 15 years more grace to us. And of course, usually there's a carbon tax that's proposed, a national carbon tax. What a carbon tax is if a utility uses any a resource that's coal or somewhat dirty, then they will be mandated or set a tax. Or in the case of California, they do have a carbon tax right now. This is a national proposal, but in the case of California, any emissions, any energy that comes from a coal-fired plant gets an automatic adder of about $15 a megawatt hour. So that makes a $40 resource a $55 resource. The California market is set for that. The rates are a little bit higher than the Utah market. We just don't want to have a carbon tax on us because we'll have to artificially raise our rates 20-30% just to cover the carbon tax. So we're watching that. Just be aware that there's something on the national level that's maybe coming down to affect us. You know, by the time it gets to the voting floor of the Senate and the House, it's going to be mixed down a little bit, but just be aware. All right, let me talk about IPA. I'm serving as the chair of the board of directors for the IPA, and I've been involved with meetings that I hadn't been involved with a lot in the past as a regular board member, in particular with the Californians. Just last Thursday, for example, we did a tour site at Delta. Some of you have been to the Delta site. It's an amazing power plant, one of the cleaner, most efficient plants in the western United States. We went with a representative from Governor Cox's office. His name is Tom Carter. He's the energy advisor for Governor Cox, and he wanted to build the view and to see the Delta plant. It was a great visit. We shared a 12-passenger van with him and his advisor, and it was good to hear what Governor Cox's I guess, perspective is on energy. Governor Cox, of course, comes from Fairview, which is a member of UAMPS, small city in Sanpete County, but he's on board with us. Governor Cox is on board with a lot of the direction we're going with as far as some of these renewable projects we're into. But that was interesting to spend some time with the key advisor to Governor Cox. The plant itself, of course, we're pursuing a change out of fuel from coal to natural gas / hydrogen mix. That's ongoing. The California entities, in particular LADWP, Los Angeles, is pursuing that. They've already awarded hundreds of millions of dollars of bid to the generator set. This is an interesting situation where this is not only a natural gas plant, which are somewhat easy to build, but the mandate is from Sacramento that they needed something cleaner than natural gas, and the only thing they can go right now is hydrogen. So the proposal is, when this plant is operational in 2025, is to do a 30% hydrogen mix and a 70% natural gas mix, which means that there's going to have to be a hydrogen making facility right on site. It means there's going to have to be some storage of hydrogen, and we've talked about the caverns that are located below the plant. They're going to use the caverns to store hydrogen, but also has to deal with a 60-mile natural gas transmission pipeline built from the Kern River, the main Kern River pipeline down to Southern California to the plant. All kinds of things are happening there. LA's taken the majority of the lead on that, and we'll just be the beneficiaries of a new plant once that's built. One thing I think was interesting is that they're worried about the employees' retention out there. You know, with the fact that Delta now knows that that plant's going to be shut down as a coal plant in 2025, the worry was that they were going to lose a lot of employees for obvious reasons. They're going to go find something else while the grass is green. And so there's a retention theory, a retention program that they're pursuing down at the Delta plant. And really, basically, it's if you'll stay with the plant until 2025, when the coal plant's shut off and the gas plant is operational, they'll give you a 5% bonus for every year to stay on. And it's helping a lot of people, and we want to keep that expertise out there. Right now, there's 360 full-time employees. The gas plant will be about 120 employees, and there's going to be about 100 expected retirements. So there's going to be about 90 to 100 people that will probably lose their jobs or be laid off come 2025. But the plant, IPP in particular, is trying to make it more palatable to these people that have put their careers in. They're giving them all kinds of other educational benefits and packages. So just be aware, the plant's going to go to partial employee load, but we're trying to make it as palatable as possible. Okay, let me talk about our summer load real fast. Diana, am I okay on time? 5 more minutes? Are we hurting? Okay. We're prepping for the summer load. We're expecting 100 degrees by this Friday. That bodes well for sales because we're going to sell a lot of power this Friday and Saturday. But also, it's concerning to us because if our June load hits hot, fast, what's going to happen in July and August? About 83% of our resource is already contracted. It's the top 17% that we go over the peak on. And it makes sense to us, business sense, not to buy 100% of our power right now. Because usually when you buy 100% of your power, you can't fit your resource like a glove because some hours of the day you will have bought too much. And so we are open and susceptible to the power market to some extent. We have our Hunter plant, we have our federal hydro, we have our landfill, and we have our natural gas generation on 48 South. We're counting on our natural gas generation big time this coming summer. Right now, gas prices are around $3.20 a decatherm. And that's a really good price, actually. And that means we can generate for about $53 to $55 a megawatt hour, or about 5 cents a kilowatt hour. We expect the market, on the spot market, let's say August 10th at 4 p.m. in the afternoon when the air conditioners are going, it's going to be like $300 or $400 or $500 a megawatt hour. We can generate for 55. So as long as we can generate with those 3 turbines, which is about 33 megawatts, we're not going to be as susceptible or worried about the market. Now, that's not going to say we're going to be able to cover our entire load because we still want to leave part of the top part of our resources, in this case 17%, to the market. We might get bid a couple hours by paying $300 and $400 a megawatt hour, but what that does is that we wouldn't have had to pay the $300 and $400 at 10 in the morning when we didn't need it. Sometimes when you buy a block of power, it's for the entire day, and we don't need it for the entire day. We just need it for 4 hours. So sometimes it's better to pay a little bit extra for those 4 hours and then not have to pay at other hours of the day. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. We've tried to line up some resource options by contract so far, but the pricing is just totally out of whack. I've got a hunch, and the numbers show that if we do the gas turbine generation, we're going to be okay. And we'll just let the market go where it goes. Natural gas prices are down. We've already scheduled about 40,000 decatherms of natural gas. It's just a mix. Let's see, a couple other things real fast. Cottonwood Hydro, coming out of Little Cottonwood Canyon, has really stunk this year. We're getting about 30% of the flow. It's never been much of a water flow for us. We've had some trouble with some bearing temperatures up there. It's not been a good hydro year, and we don't expect it to be a good hydro year. We've peaked. We've peaked with our water flow. We didn't get a whole lot out of it, and that's just going to happen. We're not going to be able to rely on that too much in July and August. Okay, outages. Second to last item. Today I got the outage report for May. We had 18 outages last month during May. You usually have 14 or 15 outages a month. This isn't too bad. 1 every 2 days we'll have an outage of some type. Sometimes it's 5 or 6 customers. Sometimes it's 50 customers, just depending on the issue. Our largest outage in May was 167 people. It was on May 23rd, a Sunday. They were out for about 70 minutes, caused by a squirrel. Caused by a squirrel getting caught up in the transformer fuse, which actually cascaded back to a section fuse. And that was not our only squirrel outage. We had 6 squirrel-related outages last month. That's totally out of whack from what we usually have. We usually have 1 or 2 a summer. I don't know why. I don't have the answer for everything. But we had 6 squirrel-related outages. We had 1 tree-related outages, but also on Memorial Day weekend, we often have our backyard tree trimmers / civilian tree corps go out and think they can fall a tree in their yard and not miss power lines. Well, we had 2 this last weekend where people felled the tree the wrong way into our power lines. So we just do it. Every holiday it happens, and people are trying to save some money by not by doing the work themselves. So that's kind of interesting. We're financially sound. Brenda could explain that better than I can. We continually turn our margins back to the positive. We're nearing the end of our budget year this next month in June. We're going to be awarding some bids for some infrastructure, machines, and equipment that we've already budgeted for. It's just kind of like the end of the year frenzy to use the money we've already budgeted. Won't be any major amounts, $30,000 per pickup, that type of stuff. So anyway, that's my report of the 2 boards, UAMPS and IPA. Once again, we invite you to the Squaw Valley in August, and Jennifer, of course, will have that information for you. So if you have any questions about the load, our employees, we've got a couple young linemen that are just wet behind the ears that look like they're like 12 years old, but they're young looking, but they are good workers. We've got some good workforce, and so open for questions.
All right, any questions for Blaine? Next time, 30 minutes. You always say you
I
just...
can keep going.
I know, that's why I said next time you're getting 30 minutes.
It's September, I think. Okay, Diane, we'll do it.
Thanks, appreciate it, Blaine. Okay, let's see, I'm told that we have the representatives from the Boys and Girls Club, Amanda Hughes, Leanne Saldivar, and Bob Dunn. So we'll hear from you guys. Bob, aren't you going up there?
Yes, I am.
I know, you were
We'll see
supposed
how
to be
that
here at
goes.
4.
You know what? I apologize. All of our radars from our emails said 5 to 5:15. So we must have misread that. Sorry about that, Jennifer. You've been trying to be so good to us. Thank you so much. I'm Leanne Saldivar. I'm the current but outgoing president and CEO of Boys and Girls Clubs of Greater Salt Lake, of which, of course, the Murray Club is our biggest and most and busiest Boys and Girls Club. I will say that there's been a lot going on the last year at the Boys and Girls Club, and squirrel-related outages is not one of them. So I'm pleased about that, because now there's something else we can all look forward to. So I did want to, I'll be brief and then take any questions. I know there may have been some specific questions, and hopefully I can cover some of those in my remarks, but I wanted to give an opportunity to introduce, and thank you for letting us come face to face to introduce our new and incoming CEO. And then, of course, she's surrounded. We've got 3 generations here of Murray Boys and Girls Club leadership. And so we're keeping her surrounded, whether she likes it or not. So I really do appreciate the opportunity to come in person. It's just been such a long time. And I think we all Zoomed about this time last year, and nobody knew what to expect and what was happening. And it certainly, I can't thank you guys enough for not only the funding every single year over year, but just really being behind your Boys and Girls Club. I've said this before, but it is the truth. We operate clubs in 5 different cities, and this feels like home. We feel at home here, and we feel that the council and the community really does love and feel like the Boys and Girls Club is an integral and vital and essential part of the community, and we can feel that from. I've had visits from council members in the last year. I got to see the mayor briefly at a masked event, so I have missed seeing you guys around, and hopefully that's all coming to an end. So I want to thank you for all that past support, but also thank you for including us, Mayor Camp, in this year's budget recommendations. This hasn't been an easy time for anybody, hasn't been an easy time for cities anywhere, and we've had really hard conversations with some of the cities we're in about where we fall on the priority scheme when everybody's hurting for dollars. And so it just means the world to us that we stay high on the priority list. I'm going to cry for Murray City. It really means a great deal. So I did pass out a little document there, and it's called an impact report, and it really looks backwards to 2020, and that's calendar year 2020. I'll let you peruse that at your leisure, but I couldn't be more proud of what our Murray Boys and Girls Club did throughout this pandemic. It was Murray, as I'm sure you all know, where the first word of the first case of COVID happened in the school district here, and we all got word really quickly, and obviously didn't know what to do in the morning on a school day, and what was going to happen next, and what were we supposed to do with the kids, what do we do with our staff, and there was just a great deal of fear. But man, our Murray team just rallied from day one and just did whatever it took. We quickly moved into becoming an emergency care center at the Murray location for parents of essential workers. We had to pay basically hazard pay to staff to ask them to come in and put themselves at risk to provide that service. And we did that for about 8 weeks or 10 weeks. Last spring, we were able to open in a really awkward, limited way. The Boys and Girls Club is a very high-touch location. And if you can't play with Legos and you can't touch a basketball and you can't be in groups and you can't ride on a van together, it's hard to program a full and active and engaging program for kids. But our staff just did a crazy good job doing what they could for the kids that we did have in person, and then just being, I wish I could show you some of the virtual programming that we did, trying to reach out and find our families, find out what our kids were experiencing, and then trying to engage them on Zoom or crazy platforms I've never even heard of. Zoom wasn't even a thing in the beginning stages, and to try to get kids keeping active and trying to keep them engaged at all with their peers and in discussions with positive adults outside of their homes. And for some of our kids, unfortunately, home isn't the finest place to be during out-of-school time hours anyway. And when you're there for a long, long time, we just saw real emotional distress with very stressed families, and that cascades to very stressed kids. So our team just did a remarkable job. And then, of course, we were able to open a little bit for limited programming in the fall. So I really want to talk more about what we're looking forward to here in the future. Our fiscal year starts July 1. And what I'm sure you've heard over and over again of what a lot of the challenges we're experiencing. Of course, we have this beautiful, bigger club, a lot of it new, that has been not used to its capacity yet. We were getting there, and then everything shut down. And so our staff, we started staff training today, and they're all over in the gymnasium over there, getting stoked up and excited to run pretty close to a normal summer camp experience for our kids. Obviously, all the kids aren't vaccinated yet, so we still have a fair amount of safety protocol and cleaning and things like that to make sure everybody stays really safe. But we are really looking forward to getting our kids outdoors, interacting with one another, and doing the normal summer camp things. But more importantly, we have a huge opportunity with our kids. That club is open 13 hours a day in the summer, to help remediate what they missed in school. And they did miss. Bless the districts and the schools for doing the best they could to provide online learning for kids. But in some households, it just didn't work. And for teenagers, they just opted out in a lot of cases. And so we have kids that have fallen behind. And in many cases, particularly the older kids, they have kind of they gave up on school. They felt like school gave up on them, and they decided maybe they didn't need to graduate from high school. And we are struggling to get kids back into the groove with that. In order to do that and to get all the kids back into the club that we want, we have planned to add 9 staff to the Murray Club in this upcoming summer camp and into the next school year. The club already had 25, 26 staff members, by far and away our largest employment base as a Boys and Girls Club network, and that would be up to 35, 36 staff members. Of those, There are 11 full-time people. That means our program director, their program level managers, and some other full-time folks that are support staff. But the vast majority of those 24, 25 of them are what we call youth development professionals, those part-time, out-of-school time folks that come in the after-school hours and then extend their hours full-time in the summer. So we're looking to add a fair number of those. We need to do that in order to get back to our capacity, which is right now with that staffing level is about 420 kids a day. As of this morning, we've registered 382 for this summer camp program. So I suspect by Friday we'll be at capacity, and then the waiting list starts. And you guys have heard me say this. It doesn't matter how many rooms we build over there. This club has a waiting list. It's very popular. And the more cool the club gets, the more kids want to come and the more they want to stay every day. So the other challenge with that is that not only do we need to bring these kids in, but we need to make sure that they're at a safe ratio and staying around 1 to 19, 1 to 20 per staff member, allowing for illnesses for staff and people that are going to be out for a while, and even letting go to lunch, which is a challenge in and of itself when you're open that long. We are having a heck of a time hiring, and I know you've heard this from everybody, and we have increased our starting wage several times since last March, and we are now averaging over $1.25 more an hour to start as we were pre-pandemic. So when you put that across 25 people that, work part-time in the school year or whatever, it's tens and tens and tens of thousands of dollars. The budget for the Murray Club had traditionally kind of hovered between $750,000 and $800,000 a year, and it is close to $1.1 million to run that club this year. The big jump in that is staffing because of those higher wages, but we're also anticipating wanting to let those youth development professionals work a few more hours a week during the school year, because we're going to be expecting them to really do academic remediation, one-on-one tutoring, STEM programming, and more intensive academics than we've asked them to do, and that means more planning time for them. So we're hoping to add 1 hour, 4 hours a week to their time. So instead of 25 hours a week, they might work 29 hours a week, so that they have time to plan and to be prepared to deliver this higher level sort of academic support to our kids. So that's what we're hoping to do. We really want to make sure that like I said, we take advantage of these out of school time hours. There's a big onus on our schools to get these kids back together, but the community partners like us that are out there during out of school times can be a big part of that. The other thing that we've added to our lineup at the Boys and Girls Club, and it's something we've been wanting to do for years, and IHC finally, we got a funder to help us pilot an emotional wellness program for our kids. So this has been a dream come true for us, and the timing could not be better. And what that involves is weekly groups with trained therapists that come to the club to meet with certain age groups to teach kids about coping skills and stress management and taking care of themselves and doing that kind of emotional self-care. But it also involves the ability, when we have kids that are really, really struggling, to get one-on-one actual therapeutic counseling with an outside partner that can come to the club and do it. The biggest barrier we've always had is we can refer kids to Valley Mental Health all day long, but if they aren't insured, if their parents can't drive them there, if their parents aren't willing, they don't get the kind of mental health care that they need, and we can do it right on site at the Boys and Girls Club. And so we've added a few components. We've added a nutrition specialist over there. We serve so much food. Food isn't our mission, but boy, do we serve a lot of food over there. Breakfast, lunch, snack, every single day to hundreds of kids. So we've got some big plans to make sure we're able to sustain this level of service, and we are grateful for Murray City and all your support in helping us make that happen. Questions from you first before I kind of introduce my teammates here?
Okay, we're about out of time. I'm sorry.
Darn
But I'm wondering, do you have a yearly report? Something that has like the staffing document and your budget and
Oh, sure.
those kinds of things? Could you
Sure.
provide that to
Just
Jennifer?
like more detail about our, the
Yeah.
budget for that club and our staffing and things like that? Sure. So
Uh-huh.
I kind of thought that little impact report was a synopsis of that, but let me do one for the forward-looking year. Our budget hasn't been approved yet, but I can get you what we've got in the works for that, certainly.
Okay, that'd be
Certainly.
great. We
Awesome. And I
appreciate
just
that.
want to say, welcome to Amanda Hughes. She's not a stranger to Boys and Girls Club, but she and I will be transitioning here over the next month. So,
When do you leave, Leanne?
the end of June.
Oh, we're going to miss you. My goodness.
Thank you. Amanda's been with me since the middle of April, so we've been holding hands and sharing an office for a while, but I'll let her tell you a little bit about her experience.
Thank you. I'll be really mindful of time. Yeah, I've been privileged to work with Leanne and Bob for the last, since 2010, really, with Boys and Girls Clubs. Was
wow.
part of our fundraising and management team there. 2 years ago, I took a little break from our local clubs and went on to Boys and Girls Clubs of America, working with our national organization to serve clubs in the Pacific region, both in Colorado, New Mexico, Montana, Utah, Idaho, California, Oregon, and Washington, and had the opportunity to really see what's going on and help clubs strategize their organizational development and all of that. And when Leanne mentioned she was retiring, I was just like, oh no, because she's built so much. She and Bob have really done so much for the kids in here. And I was like, who will ever fill their shoes and stand on their feet? And little did I know it would be me. But I'm honored to be able to do that and feel so supported by Bob and Leanne, and know that we'll continue building on that legacy. I've had the privilege to be with the Murray Club for some time. I think Mayor Camp and I even pulled some weeds and stuff out there a few years ago with a Comcast Cares Day. So I'll echo Leanne's sentiment in feeling supported from Murray and really have taken Murray Club as an example out to the Pacific region of going, look at the great work that they're doing in Murray, look at the great partnerships that they have building, look at the great, community partnerships and ownership that they have and have used that as an example for other clubs. So I'm happy to be here and look forward to working with all of you in the future.
Great. Thank you. Bob, what do you have to say?
Thank you.
Just a minute, though.
Okay. Every time I come up here, I always think, oh no. But just on the time. But I really am excited that Amanda's taking over. Just really quickly on that first. When she left 2 years ago to take her new job, I thought, no, when Leanne leaves in 10 years, you'll be the perfect person to take over this. And I didn't know it would be 2 years later, but she really is. You'll love working with her. She's fantastic. But I want to thank you guys for the support. I've been involved with the club now 43 years, and before that,
Wow.
5 years at Riverview Junior High. So close to 50 years, and just love it. And this program, the club works. And I was at the club 3 weeks ago. It's so nice to go back into the club. I hadn't been there for a year. And I was talking to some teens, and one girl I had known since she was 3 years old. And she graduated from Murray High School just last week, and we have our staff with her that were there supporting her. And she was, like you probably know, she was a State Youth of the Year this year, Shanti, and just amazing kids. And I was thinking, we also have a young man named, just how this program works, and your support over the years, I can't tell you how many kids it has impacted positively. And there's a young one named Dustin that lives behind Longview Elementary. I don't know if you know Dustin. And he's had some physical challenges. He was a club member for 10 years. And on my computer before I came over, you get the pictures, and his picture was on there at a Thanksgiving dinner with his mom. And I was just thinking, wow, and I keep in touch with her, and just the success, these kids who really don't have anything, that have been able to build really productive lives. And it goes back, to you and the council. And I just want to thank you so much and the community. And thanks, Leanne, for letting me volunteer. It's been 2.5 years since I've officially retired. And they let me come around and do fun things. So, but thank you very much. Just really appreciate it.
Any other questions, comments?
No, just big thanks for all you guys do for that program. So great
Yes,
program.
you make us proud, so thank you. Okay. Now we will continue on with reports from city representatives. on interlocal boards and commissions, and we'll start with Russ Kakala with Transjordan. Russ, are you there?
I am, and thank you. I'll try to make it short because I think it's a little long. So, last time I reported, it was basically on the transfer station and where it was at Sandy's transfer station. And now we're moving in. We've got an RFP out for engineering and design of the transfer station. We sent it out with like 3 known firms that's what they do, and we'll see if we get any more. And we're still forecasted for opening in 2024. So, and that'll change the face of garbage for Murray when that actually happens. So it's kind of exciting to finally get to that point, knowing that, in 10 to 12 years, Transjordan out there will be a transfer station itself and not a landfill. So that's the plan. So hang on, I had to turn on my video if it's working. So, and if it's not, sorry. As far as the budget goes, we received the proposed budget in April, and we're planning to do final approval in June, this next week, in a couple of weeks. So, and everything looks good there. They've proposed a 1.5 COLA and 3.5 merit, and there's a 5% health insurance increase for this next coming year. So, and then we're going to go up another $2, which you guys should be aware of that, which will be $20 a ton, and 35 commercial. We've got to do that for the next 7 years just to meet our short and long-term needs out there. And that's all I've got. Do you guys have any questions?
Questions for us?
Thanks, Russ.
Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you.
Can't wait to see you in person. That would be awesome.
Well, I tried. Sorry. I was trying to turn it on, but I don't know what the deal was. But so next time.
Well, it's good to hear from you. You take care, Russ.
Good night. You too. Bye-bye.
Okay, Mayor Camp, do you have anything on the COG?
Just briefly.
Council of Governments.
Yeah, just briefly, there was a meeting on January 21st in which the COG filled some vacancies in committees and elected a new chair, Christy Overson, Mayor of Taylorsville as the chair, and Dirk Burton as vice chair from West Jordan. They had a presentation from Cameron Deal from the League of Cities and Towns in preparation for the legislative session that was upcoming. And then Carlton Christensen and Laura Hansen presented updates to the 5-year plan for UTA. So that was pretty much the COG meeting for January. And then the next scheduled COG meeting, the next meeting was May 20th. And due to some kind of a scheduling snafu of some sort, we didn't make that. We didn't get that on our calendar, so I wasn't in attendance to that. But I can tell you what happened there from the agenda, and that was they had a presentation from 7 Greenways Visioning, which this council just recently had. There was a discussion on homeless shelters and resources from Dan Dugan from Salt Lake City. And then there was a presentation on the amendments to the 2019 to 2050 Regional Transportation Plan from Wasatch Front Regional Council. So that was the discussions from COG. COG only meets 3 times a year.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you. Any questions for the mayor? Nope. Okay. Central Valley Water, Mayor Camp.
Now, Central Valley, there's a lot going on there. I could spend hours on Central Valley.
You have 5 minutes.
Or you all. Okay. So I wanted to just kind of take some highlights of what's going on. Like I say, there's a lot going on with the rebuild over there. So I made just about 5 bullet points, and the first one I wanted to bring out is I just want to reiterate to this council that Central Valley is a very, very well-run organization. The management team is very confident and competent and experienced, and the board has a lot of confidence in our general manager, Phil Heck. I refer to him as Dr. Heck, but that sounds like a character out of some kind of a Marvel movie or something anyway. But he has repeatedly demonstrated his ability to lead that organization and save a lot of money, and he's very he's very professional and very competent. There's also an entity managers meeting that's held every month, so we get direct input on the technical level from our city, and that's attended by Danny Astle and Ben Ford. So we have direct input for the technical expertise. The second point I wanted to bring up is we just finished a $150 million bond transaction that was just completed just a couple of weeks ago. So financing is now in place. That coupled with the $75 million state loan, that was about $75 million. Coupled with those, the plan was that we would have enough money to complete the rebuild. That's still the plan. However, there are still two phases of the rebuild that have not been bid yet. So we don't know obviously what construction costs are going to do over the next while. But we did get a very favorable bond. Bond rating is AA. And of course, those of you that know Justin Zollinger know how tenacious he is. Again, a lot of confidence in Justin's ability. And he's worked very hard and has been very tenacious in assuring that Central Valley has utilized the most appropriate and most advantageous bond product. And he did a lot of shopping around. We were able to secure 1.99% financing on the 2021B series that matures in 2041, and 2.4% on the 2021C, which mature in 2047. And of course, the state loan was at 1.2%. So the financing was very good. Now we're just crossing our fingers on whether or not, what the bids will look like coming in for the last two parts of the rebuild. Which is the third point I wanted to talk about a little bit, is the reconstruction of the facility is moving ahead in spite of the construction environment that we're in. The contractor, because of the amount of concrete they use, they're a high priority customer, and they're able to get concrete a little bit easier than we are as a city, for example, but because he's a priority customer. But things have slowed just a little bit as far as getting the construction materials. But all in all, it's going pretty well. The contractor there has been doing similar to what Layton has been doing for us, and that is they had stockpiled. They saw this coming, stockpiled some of the building materials that they needed for the project. So they looked out for us that way. Number 4 point I want to bring up is that Central Valley, like any other public entity, is charged with doing a vulnerability assessment. So Central Valley requested that the Cyber and Infrastructure Security Agency, which is an agency of the federal government that works to defend against cybersecurity threats, they invited them to come out. They spent a full day out there a week before last, and we'll be looking forward to receiving their report when it becomes available on any vulnerabilities they find. And we've had several of these, not necessarily from this agency, but but through risk and through insurance. We've had been looking at areas where there's risk, and so that which is a good thing. We'll make sure that's tightened up, that we don't have those security issues. The flow meter report. You may have remembered that last time I reported on Central Valley, I mentioned that we had replaced Central Valley had replaced all of the flow meters from all the entities with newer technology. Just an update on that. Our current meters seem to be they're showing a little bit less flow than what the old ones did. That's good news for us. That's bad news for some of the other entities that are going to be paying a little bit more. We'll actually be paying a little bit less because the flow going in is a little bit less based on the new meters. However, when I say we'll be paying a little bit less, obviously we have rate increases already approved going forward, and we are currently in the process with Zions Bank of doing another rate evaluation, looking at moving forward. Obviously, we have to cover the tremendous costs of building and rebuilding that facility. So that will be coming to the council before too long. It's in the process right now of being done. So the results of that will come to the council in a committee of the whole in the future. And then finally, I wanted to, if I can share the screen, I want to share a video. I'm not sure that worked. Let me look here. Are you seeing it back there? Do I have permission to share? Oh, okay. I'm used to using two screens, so this is using just one tonight. Okay, share screen. Okay. I think we're there. There we are. Okay. So I want to show you just some drone footage here. This has been edited down, so it's not very long. But you can see what's going on down there as far as and keep in mind that this is a fully operational plant that's being rebuilt while it's operational. But this first footage is the 3W improvements projects, and what that is that's the reuse water filtration system. Which includes a new filtering building, new rotating filter disc, and a sodium hypochlorite feed, and also the old, or I should say the existing UV disinfection system will be put into that as well. And that's to reuse the water so that we can, and we'll actually be in a position where we'll be able to sell, if we have excess, reclaimed water for irrigation, but most of this water is currently being used by Central Valley. Okay, the next is the blower building project. The blower building, or the blower project, injects air into the product, for lack of a better term. It keeps water moving and keeps it oxygenated and helps break down bacteria. So throughout the entire process, air is being injected, and this is a new blower building that's being built. The next one is the Bnr Basin, which will come up here in just a second. This is the biological nutrient removal, which removes the phosphorus and the nitrogen from the wastewater, and this is to bring the plant in partial compliance with the 2014 Utah Division of Water Quality rule that I know you can remember Jim Brass talking a lot about that, the costs that it's going to take to meet that. Whoops, I meant to pause that. I wanted to pause that for just a second because this will bring us into partial compliance with that rule, which originally we were supposed to come into compliance by 2020. We received variance to go to 2025, but We will also need to add a new side stream project, which is one of the two projects that I just mentioned that we still need to bid out. So in order to get us down to where the state is requiring us to have those nutrients removed. And then the next one is the recovery replacement project for digesters 3 and 4. Now these, what's really makes this impressive is that these lids weigh somewhere in the neighborhood of 180 tons. And in fact, that crane is so heavy that it couldn't drive from one to the other. They had to partially dismantle it and move it over to the other one to lift those in. So that's actually pretty impressive. So this is a rebuild of these digester covers. And I will note, you may or may not have noticed that there's a lot of stainless steel being built in these in the plant this time, because not only are we having to do these new projects, but we're also replacing. There we go. We're also replacing components of the plant that's just worn out and rusted out. So we're doing all this at the same time. So anyway, that is Central Valley in a nutshell. Any questions?
That's the fastest I've ever seen those workers, man. They were just buzzing all over. I'll tell you, that takes a lot of faith to have that thing over your head. I'm over there going like, that was big. That was huge. I don't know if I could do that.
All right, Mayor Kemp, you have the next one, Utopia.
Utopia. I'll be shorter than 5 minutes to make up for what I just went over.
All right. That was interesting, though. Thank you.
Okay, Utopia continues to grow, mostly because of the support of the UIA, its role in providing the network for UIA, the increasing customers. And Brenda will talk about the UIA financials in just a minute after I finish this report. But Murray's build-out is continuing at a rapid pace. The published build-out schedule is by the end of 2022. So the end of this year, most of the city will be done, with the exception of there's some pockets right over here in the older part of the city. There's some areas down in District 2 between 7th West and I-15, and some areas on the east side that are scheduled to be done in 2022. And then at the end by the end of 2022, Murray should be built out. So that's the current goal there. I wanted to let you know that the board approved the addition of a chief technology officer to the staff at Utopia. It's actually a reinstatement of a former position that's been unfilled since about 2014. It was actually held by Roger Timmerman before he quit and left, and then came back as the general manager. So that position has now been filled. It's been filled by Aaron Leach, who was the chief operating officer there at Utopia. And a fellow by the name of Jeff Irwin was hired as the chief operating officer. And on May 13th, the Utopia board ratified these two appointments. So it's good news that there's so much going on that they need this position again to keep up with the technology. So that's really all I had noted for Utopia. Like I said, Brenda will talk about UIA. Any questions?
Just a comment, we're finally getting Utopia in my area. Yay, I can't believe it. All of a sudden, it's so strange. So that was good news.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, UIA, Brenda?
So UIA is humming along. They've been averaging anywhere between 900 and 1,000 new customers a month. Some of that is due to new build. Some of that is just demand within. They currently have over 35,000 subscribers, so it's growing.
We did approve a partnership with Pleasant Grove City. They're going to build out Pleasant Grove City. They will backstop the bonds that UIA will take. It's a really good thing because they have the same access to the internet as Linden does, the same providers. Linden has a take rate of 57%. So over half of the people that their system runs by, they take it. So Pleasant Grove should do the exact same thing, except for Pleasant Grove that already had the backbone put in because UIA has schools that they've been servicing. So it'll be a very quick build and we'll start seeing some revenues coming in from that very quickly, so that will be good. And we, every time they take on one of these projects, we say, is this going to hold up the build out for Murray or other places? And they say no. They can do them both at the same time. So I think where they're down to in a lot of places in Murray is getting access to cross other people's right-of-ways, and that can take a long time. So, but the neighborhood should start coming back in. There are other cities who are asking if they can contract with Utopia to provide their internet services. So, and that's about it for UA. They're doing well. Of course, they have a huge debt load, and my hope is they keep adding cities. The more profit they make, the more likely it is that our portion of what we have to pay on the old bonds will go down, and they will start being able to
That would be nice.
at least stop it from going up.
Yeah.
That's my, we'll start there. And they provide a great service. So I don't know, the mayor's been threatening to go with Utopia for a while. I don't know if he has or not, but I love my service. Any questions?
Yeah, thank you. Okay, Doug, you have anything on VEC? Valley Emergency Communications Center.
All right, so for those that are watching and may not know what Valley Emergency Communications Center is, that's the 911 call center. And I represent the city on that board. I have, well, let me just get a little background on VEC. So VEC is the call center for 10 police agencies and 8 fire agencies. And of course, Murray has both of those. There are 3 highlights that I just wanted to touch on. The first one is the budget, which, like you, the board for VEC has been working on. And part of that budget process this year included looking at the assessments that the cities and agencies pay to help fund VEC. And as you probably noticed in the mayor's budget, Murray was impacted. All cities were impacted, but Murray was impacted for both police and fire. The budget assessment for police went up 16.5% for again for police. That was almost about $80,000 a year. And then for fire, it was much less. It went up about 3.3%. And so, again, that's in the mayor's budget and will be our assessment for next year. The second item I wanted to mention is that Taylorsville, you've probably read, recently created their own police department. So starting on July 1st, they will be the 11th police agency that will be part of the VEC call center, and VEC will dispatch for the Taylorsville Police Department. And then the last item I wanted to touch on, and I'm going to share my screen for this. Has to do with the audit that was conducted by the Utah State Legislature last year in 2020. I've mentioned this in the past. They audited all the 911 call centers in the state of Utah. VEC is the largest of all of those call centers, serves the largest population area and the most agencies. And VEC's performance was found to be less than adequate by the audit. And so so VEC has been tracking since that time, since October of last year. They've been tracking their performance mostly to try and show the legislature that they are improving, which they are. So I just wanted to show you some of these statistics that VEC is tracking. So the first one has to do with the answering times, and there are three standards, if you will, for answering times. Calls that are answered within 15 seconds or less, calls that are answered within 20 seconds or less, and calls that are answered within 60 seconds or less. Obviously, the desired goal that everybody would like to see is that 90% of all calls are answered within 15 seconds or less. And you can see from this chart what VEC's performance was back in October. Only 71% of the calls were answered within 15 seconds. But if you look at April of 2021, which is the most recent data that they have, they're at 83.71%. So they're not at 90%, but they're making progress over the last 8 months on calls that are answered. And the same is true for those calls that are being answered in 20 seconds or less, and those within 60 seconds. You can see the progress that they're making there. The second one has to do with calls that are transferred to other agencies. So the goal or the ideal scenario is that less than 2% of the calls that VEC takes would be transferred to another agency. You can see back in October that they were transferring a little over 9% of their calls, and in April they're making some progress. They're still transferring about 8.23% of their calls. So it's not below 2%, and there's still some room to go there. Part of the challenge with that is that VEC also dispatches or works with Salt Lake City in the Valley, which has their own dispatch center for Salt Lake City and Sandy. And then the Utah Highway Patrol also has their own system. And since we're all in the Valley, a lot of people, what they'll do is they don't know who to call, right? Well, they call 911, but they end up at VEC. And then VEC has to transfer those calls to Salt Lake City and Utah Highway Patrol. And the plan for VEC is to solve this problem, is to get everybody on the same software. And that is well underway. Most of the Salt Lake City as well as VEC are now on the same software system, and they're hoping to get Utah Highway Patrol to join in on that system. So hopefully that will reduce the number of calls that have to be transferred. And then finally, there's what they call abandoned calls, and these are calls that people make and that didn't get answered, and so they just hang up or abandon them. And they're trying to reduce that to less than 11% of those type of calls, and VEC has moved from 23% down to 13%. So they're making good progress on abandoned calls. I will mention that the legislature is still unimpressed, apparently, by these figures, and are in a recent meeting that the staff held with some of the legislators that are pushing this. There was some, I guess, threat, if you were. Maybe that's too strong of a word, by the legislators, that if VEC doesn't get their act together soon, that they're going to have to take it into their own hands. So I don't know what that means, but we'll see what comes of that. Hopefully, VEC can get these goals met quickly, so that the legislatures not concerned. And of course, the legislature is representing the citizens, and I think we can all appreciate if we had to call 911 ourselves and nobody answered the call in a timely manner, that we would also have the same concerns. So that's my report on VEC. Any questions?
Just seems like they've had challenges forever. So hopefully they're getting their act together.
Well, I think they are. I mean, a year and a half ago, they hired a new executive director. He's had years of experience with 911 call centers in other states, and I think he's made tremendous improvement within the organization, and I think they'll get there.
Good. That'd be great. How about Metro Fire Agency?
All right, Metro Fire Agency is, again, it's a group of 8 fire agencies in Salt Lake County, primarily those that do not belong to UFA that meet. I don't really have anything to report there. We've been looking at the bylaws and updating the bylaws over the last 2 meetings, and we are changing our meetings from every other month to quarterly, just because there's not a lot of issues out there for us to meet on, and so I don't have anything to report on Metro Fire.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, Doug.
Thanks.
All right, Jennifer, do we have announcements?
No, we don't, just other than there's turkey roll-ups and chips in the office for our break between meetings.
All right, great. Thank you. We are adjourned.
Recording stopped.
Okay, thank you. Welcome to the Murray Council meeting. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Brett Hales is going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
No, we don't have any.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And put your time at 6:30.
Thank you, Brett. All right, approval of minutes, we have none scheduled. Special recognition, none scheduled. Citizen comments. If you have citizen comments, please send them to city.council@murray.utah.gov. Do we have any?
We do. We received one comment from Dan Fazzini Jr., and I will go ahead and read it. I would like to express my concern over the moratorium on only certain zones or zone change applications. A few weeks ago, Murray announced that they were holding any new applications for mixed-use developments. Although I can understand the impact of the increase of applications can have on the staff, this is not equitable to other existing zones or the process as a whole. If the city is receiving an increase in applications, the city should probably look at hiring or contracting additional resources to address the change or to meet the application needs. City staff have brought up the legislation from 2019 where initially there was going to be a penalty for cities not considering enough choice alternative or low to moderate income housing. In the end, it was amended to only include a report back to the legislature. It does not require that every zone support every use. Although I agree the general plan is a living document, having directly participated in the general plan process, I am very aware of the tremendous number of resources in both staff and time and public input is considered in the final document. These often provide a buffer in zone changes between commercial and single-family houses. Large changes should not be taken lightly and highly scrutinized, probably more so than zones covered in this current moratorium. I asked the city reconsider the moratorium and develop other methods to resolve the increased load on these applications. Thank you. And that's all we received.
Okay, pardon me, thank you. Consent agenda, we have none scheduled. We have 3 public hearings. First, consider an ordinance amending the city's fiscal year 2020-2021 budget. Brenda Moore.
So I'm going to do this one standing up. I'll move to my computer. But the mic. Is your mic on? Got it. I think I figured it out. You hired me to be finance, not tech. Okay, so this is a public hearing for the budget amendment for the 2021 budget. We went over this in the committee of the whole. There's just a few minor items on these. Okay, they're not minor in my wallet, but in the city's wallet. They're to clean up some budget things for a year end. So we did receive more state alcohol money than what we had originally budgeted as an estimate. And so we're going to increase and allocate the revenue of $7,605 for that. The building division has had some open positions in their building inspections. And so I'm going to move some funds from their payroll area down into their professional services. $190,000, and they have recently, I think, filled those positions, and we should be okay with that budget amount being moved. In the general fund, I need to increase the sales tax revenue budget by $137,850. We have received way more sales tax than we had originally budgeted, which is a very good thing. And so we're going to increase the police department overtime budget by $75,000, so they have enough to make sure they get all of their investigations done that they need to do through the rest of the year. IT needed some additional disk space, and so we're budgeting $22,000 for that. IT also readjusted how some of their positions were and some of their responsibilities. And so I need to increase their salaries and benefits in that particular department by $23,000. to better match what they're doing with their compensation. And then I need to increase the outdoor pool salaries and benefits by $17,850 due to an employee being 3/4 time, but I budgeted him at half time. And that has been fixed in the next budget, and hopefully it will never happen again. I'm not going to promise, though. The Murray Parkway Golf Fund, we're going to increase their greens fees revenue by $28,000 and allocate that to the professional services for the 4UP software. We exchange a few tee times, non-prime, I made sure of that, non-prime tee times for the software they use to schedule them online. And I think it's a fairly good trade. We do analyze that occasionally to make sure that we couldn't just go buy software somewhere for that. In the risk fund, we have received $230,581 in insurance proceeds for a case that was settled, and we're appropriating those to professional service. And the risk fund, we are also going to use $380,000 of reserves, allocating $250,000 of that to professional services for legal expenses in the settlement. And we're also allocating $130,000 for claims expense on other pending cases that are out there. The risk fund, this is exactly why we have a risk fund that's out there with $1.4 million in reserves, is so that when cases do get settled and we have to pay our portion of the deductible, which is $250,000, we don't have to play with the general fund. The risk fund has the reserves out there to cover when this happens. We just happen to have a really bad or good year. It's a good year, we got a lot settled, a bad year in that we had a lot to settle. So that's what's in the budget amendment. So.
Okay, thank you, Brenda. I'll open up the public hearing part of this meeting for citizen comments. Do we have any on this?
We did not receive anything for this.
Okay, I'll close the public hearing and I'll bring it back to the council. Do you have any questions for Brenda? Okay, I'll look for a motion.
I will make a motion to adopt the ordinance amending the city's fiscal year 2021 budget.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Brooke?
Ms. Turner,
Aye.
Mr. Hales,
Aye.
Ms. Martinez,
Aye.
and Mr. Cox.
Aye. Okay, we'll move on. Consider an ordinance adopting the transfer of monies from the enterprise funds to other city funds. Brenda?
Okay, got the tech. I'm going to share my screen. I'll just go over this quickly before we open the public hearing. This are one of the few times that share. Here. Oh, that's the budget public hearing. I don't want to see that one. This one. Okay, did I get it shared?
There it is.
Beautiful. So we are doing this public hearing in response to Utah State Code 10-6-135.5, which they allow us to do transfers from the enterprise funds into the general fund, and this is a public hearing to discuss this, and then you have to pass it as something separate from the budget. And we also need to do a discussion of the administrative and overhead costs that we allocate out. So I'm just going to go through this very quickly. If you have any questions, let me know. It should look very familiar to those of you who were watching last year. So what's the difference? Transfers out, they're a calculation based on the percent of an enterprise fund's revenue, which currently is 8. The shareholder return on, it's classified as, for me, a shareholder return on investment to the general fund to subsidize services that would otherwise require an increase in property tax. If your power company is Rocky Mountain Power, part of what they have is they have shareholders, and their shareholders get dividends and stuff. This is what this transfer is. We base it on a percent of revenue as opposed to earnings, but it's the same concept. They contribute approximately 8% of the general fund revenues, or $3.97 million, and that's just the transfers out from the enterprise funds to the general fund. Is it not working? I didn't touch anything. That's the wrong one. I want this one. No, that's the wrong one. I want this one. Let's do new share. I only do PowerPoints once a year. So the administrative cost allocation, that's the allocation based on actual administrative services costs. So this pays for centralized administration, such as the legislative or the council. Some of their costs get allocated to other departments and funds, legal, finance, IT, human resources, UB billing, the treasurer's office, etc. The estimated cost to the enterprise funds of this is approximately $3.8 million. The transfers to the general fund, the general definition is movement of cash or other resources from one fund to another for a transfer. The purpose, where the private sector utility companies are in business to provide a return investment to shareholders, Murray City shareholders, its taxpayers and citizens receive this return on investment as a transfer to the general fund. It is currently 8% of budgeted revenues in water, wastewater, and power, so only those three. We eliminated the garbage one last year and stormwater 3 or 4 years ago. For the fiscal 21-22 budget, these are the numbers, and you can see on the chart, it's a very small percentage of their revenue. The power fund looks like it's a bigger percentage. It's not. That number is just bigger and wider, so it takes it a little, you can see it. And so of the user fee revenue of $49 million, the transfer that will be coming to the general fund is 3.9, straight 8%. The administrative cost allocation, we started it with a study performed in 2012. It has been readjusted and adjusted as things change and what people are doing has changed. So we're allocating the council, mayor, finance, utility billing, human resources, the attorney, city treasurer, recorder's office, IT, and GIS. And so this is how it kind of looks. These are the total costs of the departments. City council, finance department is $622,000. Add them all up, it's $8.5 million, and they're allocated over here. The general fund keeps 52.2% of that. So 52% of the 8.5 stays in the general fund, and the rest go to the other funds as they are listed. The smallest being the library at $110,000. And the biggest, of course, is power. I could think the attorneys spend a lot of time on power contracts. So, and this is just kind of put it in a little chart for you, just because it's always easier to read a chart. See the general fund and then the power and where they're, the water. And then just a quick, you're going to probably see this on another slide, but where the money comes from in the general fund, 8% of it is coming from the transfers. And then course, sales tax is our biggest. Property tax is the next. I would like those two numbers to be more equal, but they are not. And then where it goes, you could say that 8%, a lot of that, in fact, most of it goes directly to transfers out, which end up in capital projects, most of them. So that is the transfers.
Okay, thank you, Brenda. I'll open it up for public comment, open the hearing for public comment.
We did not receive anything for this item.
Okay, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the council. Are there any questions for Brenda?
No, but thank you. Did a great job.
You guys will have that memorized.
Yeah, that PowerPoint was great. All right, I'm looking for a motion.
I'll make a motion that we adopt the ordinance, that we approve the ordinance adopting the transfer of monies from the enterprise funds to other city funds.
I will second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Laura?
Ms. Turner,
Aye.
Mr. Hales,
Aye.
Ms. Martinez,
Aye.
and Mr. Cox.
Aye. Okay, our last public hearing, consider an ordinance adopting the final 2021-2022 fiscal year budget for Murray City, including library fund budget. Brenda?
Okay, we're going to try this whole share screen again. If I can find it. I see what the issue is when you're used to having a whole bunch of screens. To find the right little, okay. So I'm just going to do a quick overview of the budget. So this is for the public hearing for the 2021-22 budget. What will the next fiscal year bring? Nobody knows, but the Utah economy is doing well. There are still some business sectors, as we know. Oh, I'm not. How did that not happen?
I've got it on my phone. Does that help?
Okay, let's try here. Let's go back here. Share screen. Where is he? Doesn't seem to want to be there. It's right there. Yeah. Okay. Sure. It's not showing up there. There we go. Okay. So while the overall Utah economy is doing really well, there, of course, are some business sectors and individual businesses that are still suffering from the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. There are still lots of businesses who can't find employees. There are lots of women who are not working because they can't find childcare, which leads to the can't find employees. And it's just, there's a big vicious cycle out there right now. The biggest concern I have for 2022 is possible inflation, especially in our construction costs. The best estimate I have right now is the city will finish fiscal year 21 around 30% in the general fund. And I did find out the state legislature will allow us to keep up to 35%. So we will be fine. They changed the law during the last session. And as the budget is proposed, we should end fiscal 22 around 26%.
Brenda?
Yes.
Is that that's a permanent law that was changed, or is it
Yep,
just for
it's
the year?
permanent.
Okay.
There was some city somewhere with lots of clout who decided that we should have more reserves.
Like a
Wasn't
Brenda.
us.
Wow, 35%.
35%. And there was a
35.
bunch of other interlocals and various other things that also could
Okay.
change their
All right. Thank you.
percentages. But yes. So we will have discussions on how fast we want to get to 35%, but for this purpose, we're going to stay at 30. The city will be receiving American Rescue Plan Act funds during fiscal year 2022 and 2023. The budget does not include anything for those funds. The general overview, no property tax increase. Sales tax revenue is budgeted at 1% above what I expect to collect this year. Charges for services and fines and forfeitures budgets in the general fund have been decreased because they're having continuing effects from the COVID-19 pandemic. I should have decreased them more last year, but who knew? Charges for services in the water, wastewater, and solid waste funds were increased due to previously approved rate increases. All remaining revenues have been budgeted very conservatively so that it helps control our spending. These things were funded. The step plan increases were funded, a 3% cost of living, the medical and dental insurance increase of 6.1 and 0.5. Workers' compensation premiums also increased. That's a very small number, but it's always good to know that what's happening with them. 3 new positions were requested and approved: a civil engineer, a senior planner, and a police lieutenant. 13 pay ranges were adjusted to stay within 3% of market, and 6 position adjustments were done to better align with their duties. In the operations, we returned light items which were cut in fiscal year 21 to 2020 levels where they were necessary. We did not restore everything, just where people thought that they needed to be restored. The capital improvements projects, we have $7.8 million in projects to maintain or purchase facilities, equipment, or infrastructure out there. So we will be buying quite a few things in CIP. The enterprise funds are continuing to do infrastructure projects that are outlined in their master plans, and Power is going to create a master plan as part of their budget this time. Here's just a general budget overview of all the funds. We are using $2.7 million of reserves in the general fund to make this budget balance. Those are reserves that were created last year or in fiscal year 21. The 2 years will actually end up pretty even, if not increased. The other funds are the library is continuing to save for their new library. The RDA fund is going to be building balance as it sits right now. All of the enterprise funds, the majority of them are using their fund balance to create assets, which is just changing from a cash into an asset. We are concerned. I think you heard about the wastewater fund with all of the Central Valley construction. So we're looking at that right now. And the solid waste fund is starting to build a small balance, which we need. They were just about to go negative before our last rate increase. As things transition into the new transfer stations and the closing of it's probably going to be good if solid waste has a fund balance there to handle some increased costs. So that is just the basic overview. Where it comes from, I just saw this by $53 million. You've got sales tax being our main source, and where it goes, the most being police and fire. The blue and the red take the majority of our budget, and then other than that, Parks and Recreation is next, and transfers out, which goes to the CIP fund. So that's just a great flyover of our budget. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Brenda. I'll now open up the public comment section of the hearing. Do we have any comments?
We do not.
Okay, well then I'll close that and bring it back to the council. No questions? I'll take a motion. Well, then I won't worry about it. Then never mind. Okay, with that, we have no business items scheduled. How about the mayor's report?
Yeah, sorry, I was just chatting with GL.
He wanted us to pass the budget, did he?
I was just asking if there was any formal action needed or any action needed to keep the public hearing open. But he says no. So thank you. I just have a couple of items. And they're both related to the parks and Recreation. The outdoor pool over the weekend was very, very popular. Yesterday, Memorial Day. Well, let me start with Saturday. 141 customers came in, and yesterday or Sunday there were 240. But on Monday, 829 customers in the pool. Now, keep in mind they weren't all there at the same time. but yeah, so the pool was very, very popular yesterday, big hit. And then I also just wanted to give a shout out to our cemetery crew for the cemetery looked just really, really good this weekend for Memorial Day. They did a great job. They keep our cemetery maintained year round, but it looked especially good for the holiday. So just wanted to thank them. And I will entertain questions if you have any.
Any questions for the mayor?
No questions, but just a big thanks to your staff and Brenda and the department heads, everyone. I mean, really, from the 2020 to now, this budget has been pretty impressive. So, and Kat, you did a great job. And Diane, and well, I'm thinking about the people that chair it, but anyway, it was very impressive going through that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. And with that, the meeting is adjourned. That's too late.